Welcome back to Tech Sensory Solutions. Today we're taking a trip back to the 90s to dissect a true handheld warrior, the Sega Game Gear. Buckle up as we explore its guts, its games, and ultimately its downfall. Get ready to shove in some double A's, crank up the volume, because those speakers were tiny, and dive into a world of color that Sega promised would dethrone the king, Nintendo's Game Boy. Let's crack this bad boy open and see what makes it tick. Picture it, 1990. Hammer Pants roamed free, Vanilla Ice ruled the airwaves, and Nintendo was king of the portable gaming world. Sega, never one to back down from a fight, decided to challenge the champ with their own colorful contender, the Sega Game Gear. Codenamed Project Mercury, because even handhelds need cool code names, the Game Gear was designed to be the bigger, badder, and yes, colorful brother to the monochrome Game Boy. Sega was betting big on the allure of a backlit screen that could pump out more colors than a rainbow on steroids. Every piece of tech has its masterminds, and the Game Gear was no different. Hideki Sato, the tech wizard who helped birth the Sega Mark III, aka the Master System, was instrumental in designing the Game Gear. His mission: destroy the Game Boy with a screen so vibrant it would burn an imprint on your retinas. But Sato wasn't alone. Sega enlisted the coding prowess of Chrysalis Software, with Sean Hollingworth and Matt Furness lending their talents. These guys were instrumental in making sure the hardware could actually, run games. They even cooked up the Gear Video decoder board so you could hook this bad boy up to a TV. Alright nerds, time to get our hands dirty with the technical mumbo-jumbo. The Game Gear was packing some serious heat for a handheld of its time. It boasted an 8-bit Zilog Z80 CPU clocked at a blazing, well for the time, 3.5 MHz. That's like comparing a snail to a slightly faster snail, but hey, it got the job done. The star of the show was the 3.2-inch backlit TFT LCD screen. This thing could pump out a resolution of 160 by 144 and display a whopping 32 glorious colors simultaneously from a palette of 4096. Sure, it ate batteries like a kid in a candy store, but man, those colors. Sound was handled by the trusty SN7649 sound chip, which did its best to blast chiptunes through the mono speaker or your headphones if you were lucky enough to have a pair. Section 5. Powering up the experience peripherals. No self-respecting gaming system is complete without its gadgets and gizmos, and the Game Gear was no exception. Sega knew that to compete with the Game Boy, they needed to offer players more than just games. First up, we have the Master Gear Converter. This bad boy let you play Master System games on your Game Gear. Sure, the screen was tiny, and the control scheme could be a nightmare, but hey, you could play your favorite Master System games on the go. Then, there was the TV Tuner. This thing turned your Game Gear into a portable television. The picture quality was about as good as you'd expect from a potato chip, but hey, you could watch TV on a screen the size of a postage stamp. Section 6, Game On. Notable titles for the Game Gear. Now for the main event, the games. The Game Gear had a respectable library of titles with some real gems hidden among the shovelware. Of course, no discussion of Game Gear games would be complete without mentioning the Blue Blur himself. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 was the system's killer app. It showcased the Game Gear's color capabilities and proved that Sega's mascot could run just as fast on a tiny screen. Columns, the addictive puzzle game, came bundled with the US release, providing countless hours of block-dropping fun. But the Game Gear wasn't all about Sonic and falling blocks. Super Battle Tank proved that even after Sega officially pulled the plug, third-party developers like Majesco Entertainment were still willing to churn out games for the little handheld that could. Section 7. Variations on a theme Game Gear models. Like any good piece of tech, the Game Gear went through a few revisions during its lifespan. The original Japanese model, the HGG 3210, came with 2 different board revisions, because even Sega couldn't decide on the best way to build the thing. Later on, Sega released the HGG 3223, better known as the Kids Gear. This version was designed to be more appealing to younger gamers, with a more rounded design and a slightly less eye-searing color scheme. And then there was the Majesco re-release. In 2000, Majesco Entertainment, those brave souls, decided to resurrect the Game Gear and give it another shot at glory. They released a budget-friendly version that was basically the same as the original, but with a slightly different logo. Section 8. Marketing Muscle. Selling the Dream. Sega went all out trying to convince gamers that the Game Gear was the handheld to own. They knew they were up against a titan in the Game Boy, so they pulled out all the stops. Their marketing strategy was simple. emphasized the Game Gear's superior technology and convinced gamers that color was the future. They ran ads that showed kids playing the Game Gear in all its colorful glory, while their boring friends were stuck with their dull gray Game Boys. They even touted the Game Gear's more powerful hardware, even though most gamers couldn't tell the difference. Section 9, Sunset for a handheld hero, the Game Gear's decline. Sadly, all good things must come to an end, and the Game Gear was no exception. Despite its impressive tech and respectable game library, the Game Gear was plagued by one fatal flaw: its battery life. Remember those 6 AA batteries we talked about earlier? Well, they didn't last long. We're talking a measly 3 to 5 hours of playtime. That meant gamers were constantly swapping out batteries, which got expensive and annoying. Another nail in the coffin was the lack of killer apps. Sure, Sonic was great, but the Game Boy had Mario, Zelda, and Pokémon. Ultimately, the Game Gear couldn't compete with Nintendo's killer lineup, and it slowly faded into obscurity.
Thank you for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below letting me know what you think. Until next time, may legends be born.